I say framework, but very loose. It's more of a framing word, really, that my friends and I use a lot when we design together. Right? So I just want to share it with you, because I'm not sure that's a way everybody designs, right? So yeah, what's happening? It's going to be, who I am. Just a very quick summary of what I've done. What am I talking about? Was on the first slide already, and then how it might be useful and how you might, find use for it. The first bit, the who, I'm just going to show some of my projects, but I'm not going to go into detail because that will come in later when I am sort of trying to explain what I'm talking about and why I'm using. So I'm using them as my example, so no point, sort of double tapping it too much. Okay, let me figure out this. There we go. Okay, so
Russell, sorry, can you stand at the X? I forgot to tell everybody, we are trying to film everybody's master classes just for our own record. So yeah, stand around this area.
I'm feeling you're quite far away from the X.
I'm sorry, it was my bad, I forgot also. Sorry.
So, so first game that my friends and I made, this was like back in year 1 uni. It's called Kawa, it's a game about flowing petals on a river. Right, so small board game, I'm a board game designer in case I realized I did not mention that, so I designed board games, that's my background. So this is about flowing petals on a river. We've just done one about it's a tarot spread, right? So this was a tarot inspired game. I think aside, never mind, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so we kickstarted this. I'm stressed about this, and I'm still stressed about it because Kickstarter is stressful in general. Avoid it if you can help it. I'm also having fun writing, so I made a small murder mystery design. This is very loosely improv inspired. I'll talk a bit about that later when it's right. And then yeah, so as Jack mentioned, so those things I did with my friends as an indie sort of designer. And then I'm also sort of the game designer at Paylog, which is a company that makes, so they made this before I joined them. So you might have seen the Kickstarter, so this is Flyaway, it's a game about bird migration, they did this with BirdLife. So that's been out, they had this out before I joined them. And then I worked with them since with a few small things, right? So we made a small love letter sized pocket game for Singapore bird race. And I'm working with them on an upcoming sort of deduction-ish game about the size of something like, I want to say, something towards more Lost Legacy, like that was close to the Lost Legacy, but for size and how it plays. And then also I love historical fencing, so if you guys know Hima, I'm really into that. So that's me on the right, I'm sort of stepping out of range of the thrust, and then trying to strike the guy later. Yeah, so I love this, if I talk about this, I can also talk about it, because I also help out at a nearby school, sort of like, teaching some of the basics. Okay. I'm probably speeding up. Again, you guys can tell me if I'm sort of going too fast. It's there. Okay, what am I talking about? Yeah, so this idea is non-negotiable. So the word, I think, one of my friends, when we were preparing some discussion thing, I think came up. I believe it's vaguely civil service-ish, right? It's a word that came up in one of the frameworks we were looking at when we were planning for something, and then it sort of stuck with the team, right? Stuck with my friend as we used it to design stuff. And for many of you, this idea is not going to be new. That's why I said for the professionals, just treat it like, I'll be sharing about who I am and how I like to design. So for you guys, it will be at best a reframing of something you guys already do in practice. At worst, you'll just be a reminder that, hey, do this thing. For the apprentices, and I wasn't sure what the division would be, but apprentices, maybe it's something a bit newer and something worth trying to consciously put into practice when you design it. So, okay. So yeah, non-negotiable is exactly what it says on the cover. It is something in design that cannot be changed. There are a lot of assumptions going into this, as you guys are probably not teasing apart already, and the assumptions and the sort of prerequisites are what's interesting. Okay, so what are some examples? Right? And this genuinely, when I say non-negotiable to my friends and I use the term, we use it to mean almost anything in design that we're putting a pin in, sort of pinning down. So it could be something like, okay, it must allow for meaningful solitaire gameplay. Right? That may be sort of a non-negotiable going with the design. Right? And I know you guys are going to sort of be designing stuff for the next, a few weeks. So you might decide that, okay, a non-negotiable for our designers that it must allow for a single person to express the whole thing in a fulfilling manner, right? They cannot have a discounted budget experience. They must be designed in mind, right? In my future, you might say, well, okay, the game needs lots of guys. So, a running joke, but I was joking with Jet, I have a game idea in my notebook sketch. The title of the game is just called Sexy Gun Boys. And the game starts from there, right? That was the starting pitch for that game, right? So it might feature that, and that's perfectly valid. And we joke about this now as, it's quite fun. But you can imagine this coming up in, let's say, a business side discussion for what should a studio make, what is profitable. They might decide that, hey, it's Hawkeye season, let's make a Hawkeye game.
Yeah!
I suspected you might appreciate that. But you can also say something maybe a bit more wholesome. You say, a bit more, I guess, expected. I'm not sure everybody's going to make a Hawkeye game, but I can imagine people here saying something like, we want a way for every member of the team to contribute the tracks. And this might be a non-negotiable. You might say that, everybody in the team, we're going to sit down and figure out what your strengths are. the final project must let everybody shine. And this doesn't need to be a non-negotiable, right? Some teams and some games can say, well, it's fine, this project, you're taking a picture, that's perfectly fine. But you might decide to fix that in place. I skipped the slide, let me try to roll that back. I can. Nice. Okay, yeah, so, and it's most superficial. Non-negotiable is just a feature list, right? Just a list of things that go into your game. Sure. But I think it's better to see it as a subset of feature lists, in the sense that, by logically speaking, all your non-negotiables should be features in your final product. But vice versa is not true, right? The other way, because in fact, you would argue that everything else in your feature list is probably quite mutable, right? We like to talk about design as very iterative, right? It's very sort of, it's a lot of repetitions, things are changing and dropping and shifting and mutating. So the non-negotiables are sort of the islands of calm within that sea of change. Yeah, so I'm saying my feature list is it's a bit forgiving, right? It's almost too forgiving. It is very descriptive. These are what these are the parts of the game. The non-negotiable is, I would say by definition, a bit prescriptive. It is normative in nature. This is what the game should have. This is what the game needs to have for it to be what I want it to be. And it also, in that sense, requires a very harsh sort of lens in looking at the game, right? You need to ask yourself, why can't something be changed, right? And I think that why, right? Thinking about why something may or may not be a non-negotiable is why I'm used for you guys. And again, that kind of bit is basically what I'm going to talk about the projects I've done and sort of try to break them down with this sort of framing lens. So for the professionals, just take a chill. You guys probably know what I'm talking about. For the apprentices, hopefully something useful in this. Okay, so let's start with the most obvious one. This is the one slide thing. The most obvious reason something might be not as cool is because it's been assigned to you, right? And you guys are coming to the jam. You guys will have some sort of parameters, right, set. That's perfectly fine, right? Any sort of project you start has some parameters. This is actually pretty big if you look at something like a board game design, right? Because for board games, what are our physical parameters? What are the non-physical? Right? I don't have, most of the time I don't have music, I don't have sound, I don't have animation, right? There's specific things about the nature of what I'm trying to do that are assigned to me by the by the project itself. And those are by and large non-negotiable, right? Unless I convert it to a video game, I'm not going to be able to have animation on the table. Right? Caveats, I know there are some games that try to do that by and large. But yeah, so that's a very quick one because it's not much. I don't think it's very interesting to talk about that. I want to talk about this a bit more. I've got like two more points after this. But this one I think is interesting. So one way to look at non-negotiables is to think of them as, well, they are non-negotiable because if I remove them, it becomes a different game. The minute I take that out, it's an entirely different game. So, okay, whose shape is this, right? It's the old thing about the shape of features, right? You know where I'm going with this, right? We talk about design as very mutable, very we keep changing things. So like with the shape, if I change everything in the design, right? So basically start with this jam, you've got like your features A, B, C, D. By the end of the jam, everything has changed. Is it the same game, right? Did you make the game you set out to make? And how do you know that you've made that game, right? So you can treat the non-negotiables as this is the core fun of the game. These are my unique selling points, right? This is it. Like this is, if I've got like 3 minutes in an elevator with like some big shot, and he's asking me, okay, what do you do, right? What am I telling him first? What do I know is probably not changing from between now and then, right? Those questions are what I'm getting at here. The non-negotiables usually map pretty well with the core file. And if they, exactly, if your non-negotiables don't map to your core file, ask yourself why. Because that's a pretty spicy situation to be in, I think. Right? If you're saying that these cannot be changed, and that's my core file in the different. Because then you're telling me that your core file can be changed. Right? Which is not a bad thing if you're conscious about it. Right? So if you're doing a pure client work and the client has no vision for the fun of the game, they just want a game with these characters, with this perspective, you might say, okay, the core file is perfectly malleable. It is the client's demands that are not malleable. But anyway, so let me just talk about, and this is what I'm talking about my projects. So let's talk about my projects, and let's talk about my projects and what the sort of non-negotiables were in this lens of the core file. I think it's a good way to introduce what I do. So Kawa, Kawa means river in Japanese, for those of you who sort of know Japanese. And the core vision, right, the core non-negotiable at the start of this project, we said, okay, the game needs to have petals flowing. Flow is a big sort of thing in the game. Right? The game needs the physical components that flow downstream. There must be that sense of motion. Basically, the components must physically migrate downstream. Like that has to be in the game. Most of the other things actually were very, at this stage, up to change. So the mechanics of the game essentially are you've got a grid of 4x4 river tiles and your petals basically flow downstream. Right? So each tile has a sort of a current on it, and they're going to flow. They're going to follow the current. And the scoring happens, things happen, but the main mechanic is the flow. And this is the early sort of like prototype kit. This is the very first thing that we printed out to start. it's tremendously different in its core mechanic. So the current game sort of plays a bit like a spatial puzzle, where you're trying to figure out routes and paths. This game had a bidding mechanic where you would, it was a, there are elements of worker placement and bidding in that you would have a cluster of petals, you would divide them up between, okay, I'm going to bid for turn, I'm going to bid for starting position, what's left gets floated downstream, and then you float to scoring bids. It's a very, very different game, it's a far chunkier game. But those things I talked about, those mechanics, those were very much up for discussion. Right? When we were designing this, we were not wedded to those mechanics at all. Right? Again, the only thing we said, okay, is there flow? Does it flow? And so those things all basically got removed and changed. Right? In fact, you see a little fox there, right? So in the past, you had sort of like player, like you were playing with sort of like player powers and a lot of nonsense like that. And that's obviously all got Arcana Frontier. So, and sorry, just to go back to that. So in a sense, it's quite clear what the core fun of this game is, like, and how it introduces game to people. Okay, Arcana Frontier, so this is a game, there were two big things here, right? And these are very experiential in a sense. So the game needed to be off tarot, not about tarot. And what I mean is that I think a lot of games, especially nowadays, borrow the tarot aesthetic. Right, they borrow the tarot sort of mood, but they are not, there's nothing inherently tarot about them beyond the use of tarot as some sort of framing device. So you've seen games, for instance, when they group, let's say, characters into, let's say, oh, these are the 12 signs of the zodiac. You could basically with tarot, it wouldn't be much different, right? You're basically using tarot as a way to maybe identify classes, right? And to be clear, I love this sort of games because I'm a big, like, I'm a big fan of that aesthetic. So was it Tactics just came out, Persona 5 Tactics, fantastic game, I love it. But there's nothing inherently tarot about me running a squad around a map shooting people. There's not tarot, it's tarot flavored, it's tarot themed, it's not tarot. You wanted a game that felt like a tarot read. You needed to feel like you were in a tarot sort of setting, having your fate sort of foretold for you. Right? So experientially, we said that was non-negotiable. It had to feel like that. We could not just sort of pay lip service to the tarot setting. And that sort of led to the second non-negotiable, which is that okay, then physically the components, the game had to be tarot cards, right? The board had to be a tarot spread. So the components in that sense became human-sized. And what do I mean? What's an example of a game that self-does? So for instance, I think the Arkham Horror LCG, which is a fantastic game, they have a series of tarot cards as well, which I love because it's super cute. But the thing is that in that game, it's basically a regular sort of, you can think it looks like a trading card game. So you've got your box, you've got your the title, you've got the card effects. The tarot cards in that game are mini cards within the cards, which is one, super cute, I love it, but two, it's not what we want, right? Because that immediately takes you away from this is a tarot reading. But the minute I see a card on a card, it's obviously not a tarot reading. I'm playing a game where there are tarot cards in the abstract game space. So we said, okay, right, so experientially it needed to feel like it's about tarot, and physically the components and everything had to be scaled, therefore, to that experience. So this is the map. We have a cloth play map, right? We sort of squeeze it in the box, and it fits somehow in the box, right? So there's a cloth play map that is designed to be, it's a feel reminiscent of like, tarot cloth mats, where you get a tarot mat, or tarot sort of mat. It's meant to be like that. And the mechanics are about what the gameplay is like, and I guess you guys can see whether you agree that we've tried to hit what we did. What we said the core fun was, or the non-negotiable was. So, it's a 1v1 game, it's asymmetrical. One person, you are basically the dealer, you are the person sort of laying out the spread. The other person, you are the leader, right? You are trying to read the spread and trying to divine something from it. So, there's a bunch of terms. This was on the Kickstarter page, right? Which made more sense there, but just to go through it very briefly, there are 10 cards in play, and at the start of each round, one person, so this is what person A, right? The good guy, I heard a beat. Okay, okay. So, one guy picks a card, right? You're going to figure out, okay, our body standard, the cards are numbered 1 to 9 with 2 5s, right? That's mechanically relevant, not important here. You're going to choose a card and you say, okay, I think that's the one that the bad guys are going to sort of feel from. So sorry. Okay. Then the fates, which is the bad guy in this game, they're going to pick one to drive the madness, right? They're going to pick one and corrupt that card. So the big sort of mechanic of the game is realized is, do you get that one card, right? Did person A correctly predict the card that person B is going to choose? At that point, person B, the dealer, puts the card onto the spread, right? The very nice playment there. If the prediction was correct, it comes in sort of safe, it's good. If they fail to catch the card, it comes in evil and corrupted. And then obviously the cards have lots of effects, right? So the idea is that cards, once they're down, they move stuff, they flip stuff, they play out, right? And obviously, right, it's the interplay of effects that help you read, right? So when I say guess a number, say if you guess a number between 1 to 9, you're basically guessing the value, right? And it's not very fun. But if I told you, well, okay, 1 does this, 2 does those, 3 cares about 1, and 5 does this, and the board looks like that now, all of a sudden, your prediction is not a shot in the dark, right? You're making a meaningful deduction based on what you're reading into the spread. right? So this big thing, but essentially, it's not just about, and also obviously you're trying to feed your friend as well, right? You're trying to know how well you understand your friend, and that's a big part of the fun of the game as well. And then after you've laid out 9 cards, you're going to see, right, do we have more cards that are on the good side or more on the evil side, right? And at that point, you figure out who wins that, right? So again, 1v1 game, very straightforward. So you can sort of see how we're trying to get at this idea of the experience of being in a table V, right? You've got a spread of cards, they're laid out to you one at a time. Each time one comes down, the interpretation changes, the way you interpret that spread changes, because now, cards meanings in the sense of how valuable they are to you, to each player, that shifts as well, quite radically. And again, right, we try to define it out, with the idea that what's the best way to get at prediction or prophecy is just make a game about predicting the other party. Right? So that's all what we're trying to do here. So that's how we try to get to the sort of non-negotiable, the core fun of this game. The killers, we basically said, for this one, this is something I wrote for fun, right? This is basically, we said, okay, we didn't want to predetermine ending or solution. So there are some sort of mystery-based games and sort of packages out there. Japan's really big on murder mystery, or mystery-style stuff. But those, to me, if they can't package a solution, we say, I play once, I'm done with it. Right? In a sense, it becomes more about trying to solve it. So when I play these sort of murder games, oftentimes I'm less interested in the actual universe, right? The magic circle project of the game. Instead, I find myself often trying to game the designer. Right? So if I was a designer, would I let the murder be resolved in the first 5 minutes? Probably not. Therefore, it can't be this person, it needs to be that person, right? And then you start, you're not really, getting into the spirit of what you're supposed to be doing. So I wanted, okay, no determine ending solution. I wanted to be GM just because I played a group of friends and obviously, it'd be nice for us to not need to GM for each other, to just sit down and start playing. And I was playing a lot of Great Destiny Chronicles, because GA is fantastic. So I wanted a system with a lot of twist and turnabouts, right? A lot of hold it, a lot of okay, you thought that, but in this, right? Or okay, hang on, you're saying this, but actually that thing's happening there. So those were the non-negotiables, so the core fun. Those were saying, that to me saying this must be done. And the game went through a bunch of changes. At one point there were stats. I hate stats as far as possible. At one point there were stats, right? That has changed. It's changed to the point where this is all that's left. This is the main game loop. Everybody discovers a clue, and then we are going to twist the clue, and we do that about 3 times in a row. Right? Obviously, everything else in the game supports that. So there are rules that you can take that tell you what sort of clues you can discover, that sort of affect the sort of twist that you are making, there are interjunctions that you can do. There's a few other things going on in the game, of course. But essentially, everything else got pared away, right, as design happened. Right? Because those were not part of the core fun, right? Stats were never part of the core fun. One more we use dice, Jesus Christ, right? Like dice were definitely not part of the core fun. That got removed very early on. Right? But knowing what the core fun was, let me make those decisions to cut those things. Because if I did not know that, I would have tried very hard to do the dice in, right? Because if you think of traditional sort of tabletop game, think dice, stats, numbers, stuff like that. And I didn't want that in. Or rather, it didn't matter to the game I was trying to play. And yeah, so basically, the idea was that you would have, you would discover stuff, and then you would start asking questions about those things you're discovering, right? And those questions, those implications, were the meat of the story being told. So you wouldn't actually sort of go like, oh, I'm walking here to do this. You'd be saying, well, I found this, and hey, like this comes from that region which you said your character is from, and that's a long way from home. What's that doing here? But that sort of stuff. So just to sort of quickly sum up this relatively long ramble about myself. Non-negotiables help you figure out the core identity and the most essential identifiers of the game. For, I think, creatives, oftentimes we like to do the reverse. Right, you come up with something, you make something, and then you can pitch to somebody. How do I summarize my fantastic stuff into 2 lines to pitch? Right? So maybe you should sort of have that earlier from the start. And for the apprentices, be very clear what this is, because especially for starting out your toolkit isn't as broad, it's very easy to get lost among everything going on. Right? So it just hold true to what your non-negotiables are and help you sort of figure out where you're going. Okay, second reason why. It's because you just really wanted it. Right? The why is something non-negotiable because I wanted it. This you can do for certain projects. And in fact, I would say most projects, even if time projects, you have certain leeway of what you can sort of fix yourself as something you want in. Right? And this is useful why? Because you can then something about patterns of non-negotiables. Right? Because again, saying something is non-negotiable, and the word I know is very harsh, right? Non-negotiable is an ugly word. And I think that's very intentional because it's not a fun word. You don't want to make things non-negotiable for the sake of it. Right? Nobody's going to be like, hey, what are our top 5 non-negotiables? Like, that's not a very fun thing to discuss with a team. Right? We want to make the game not talk about this sort of nonsense. So, in that sense, if you have things that are non-negotiable, presumably they're important to you. Right? Presumably they matter to you when you're designing the game. And if you can find patterns in them across your projects, then actually, I put the summary slide afterwards, but basically what it does is it tells you about yourself as a designer. And it helps you understand the sort of things you're interested in designing. So, just a quick example, I'm working on other stuff, right? So I've got other stuff sort of in my sort of icebox. And like, I've got one game where it's basically sort of virtual theme, right? And for that game, so obviously there are a bunch of other things going on, but I think the interesting non-negotiable from that is that, well, I said, okay, right, the main card effects are basically prohibitions and injunctions, right? Because back in the virtual, right, things are very much about, you know, what can you do, what must you do, and the game's really trying to make players feel, the game's really playing with those restrictions as its main mechanic, right? Everything else in the game, even size, I'm sort of like, you know, leaving out in the air, but I'm slowly sort of working at that. Another one I'm looking at is a game, this one I've paused development on, but I know I'm going to go back to it. It's basically called Click, right? Like high school clicks. And the main, I just want in that game, like the non-negotiable is that I must have players say to each other verbally as part of a game mechanic, okay, I don't be your friend anymore. Like, hey, you know, actually, you know what, I know you've been with bros, but we're just not friends anymore. And that needs to have a mechanical, like, that needs to tie to a mechanic in the game. And I don't want this to be an RPG. I want it to be an actual, like, you know, there are cards and stuff going on the table where somehow a mechanic is not befriending, you know, friendly or not friendly my friends, right? And we just wanted, in my head, I wanted the vision of people at like a convention sitting at a table, going, I'm not a friend anymore, and then you know, just shouting at each other like that. So these are the sort of things that I just had in my Xbox and tried out. And in general, from there, right, looking at my other designs, looking at this, I think the way I design, I'm trying to sort of verify experiences. I have a particular vision of a particular sort of like theme, right? And very top down in the sense that I start with, let's say, okay, it's a game about ritual, it's a game about clicks, it's a game about you know, tarot spreads, game about river. And I try to, almost in a very sort of like stupid sort of way, convert that into an actual sort of like possible experience. Right? I don't try to abstract it too far as possible. I just try to say, well, okay, it's a river, therefore rivers flow, therefore rivers flow down. Right? Okay, tarot card, tarot do what? Tarot predict, okay, predict. Right? It's a, I guess, very sort of muscle-headed approach to it, but I guess that's how I design, right? And that's useful for me to know, because they help me talk to people about my design. It helps me understand the sort of designs I'm making. That generally just, self-discovery is not a bad thing. And so in that sense, being aware of what those are, I think helps you quite a lot as you're developing. And again, this is, like I said, for people who have done this for a bunch of years, this is not news to you guys, but for the apprentices, start thinking about that, because if you start collecting your projects in your portfolio, you start figuring out what you are trying to do, right, what you're about. Yeah, so I do not know what's style. It's a messy, overloaded term, but for a lack of a better, almost succinct word, right, because I'm aware that time is not infinite, right, a persistent pattern of non-negotiables can help you understand that style, right, what are you? Okay, this is probably the more useful or relevant one, especially for apprentices, which is that without non-negotiables, if you don't have them, so why make something non-negotiable? Can I do a project without any non-negotiable? My personal stance is, well, without non-negotiables, it is very difficult to navigate your design space. Right? In fact, it helps you to pin down stuff because it makes design a bit smoother. So basically, you can paraphrase that, right, essentially as, so what are you holding constant? And yes, you know, my background was social science, right? Because this idea that, you know, if you run an experiment, you always ask, what are your constants in a, you know, what are your constants, what are your variables, that sort of thing. So in this case, when you think about your design, what are you holding constant in? Are you standing up because you're running out of time? Okay, good. So you're asking yourself, what are you, you're asking yourself, what are you holding constant in your overall design space, right? I think, I didn't put this in my slides, but I remember reading a book about, I think, chaos theory, and it's not talking about the dynamic system, basically everything is a point of change, and that's why it's so hard to predict. So basically, you want to not let that happen, right? Especially if you guys only have a few, you know, a few weeks, a few months to do this. So you need very quickly to put down things and lock stuff down. There we go. Because without a fixed point of reference, interpretation is quite meaningless. Right? Interpretation emerges when you have things to compare and react to. Right? In fact, to use jet ski, fantastic. So, you know, the game about language. Something about
Chance of Sonar.
Yeah. So, no, somebody's I think coming in, but anyway, so if you look at that game, the way translation works is precisely with fixed points of reference. Right? Once you lock in a few words, other words make sense around those words, and then you start building from there. Right? It's very much the same with your design space. So let's do an example. Let's say someday you get this off feedback. Somebody plays a game and they go, oh, it's fun, it's fun, but it's kind of slow. And I'm not sure about the difficulty curve. It feels, you know, it gets very challenging very quickly. Right? Very wishy-washy general comments that honestly are frustrating to you because like you're like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, where am I going with this? What are you telling me? Right? You know, sometimes you wish your playtesters gave you like one actionables, but they give you something like this, they give you a block like this. Right? So let's say the non-negotiable, let's say the relevant non-negotiable is that, okay, it's a fast game, pocket game. So it's speed and size. It's going to be fast, and the size is a pocket game, so I've got maybe like 24 cards. Okay, so the questions then become, the way I'm interpreting this, right, this statement, I'm going to start interpreting it by asking questions like, well, okay, what's causing the slowness, right? What elements of the game's current fun, because apparently it's fun already, it's pretty good, right? It's great, we got it fun. What elements of that fun have basic place demands on speed or outcome of its slowness, or basic what are the interactions between fun and speed, right? Because we know it's fun, I'm not worried about the fun, but if I want to then start tweaking the speed, right, is that going to affect the fun that's already been there? And we can also ask, the last one I think is the fun one, which is that if we say the game is fun, but it's not fast, right, then I set out to design a fast, small game. We've hit the fun. So are my mechanics that I put to the game truly supporting or maximizing the benefits of a fast game? Right? Because being a fast game gives you certain advantages. Right? It means players usually are quite forgiving with what you might call bullshit mechanics. My favorite example of this is Love Letter. So I love Love Letter. I think it's a fantastic game, but only because it's very fast. Because Love Letter is the only game you can die before your turn starts. Right? You set up the game, you go, your friend goes like, God, 5. And you're like, 5, I'm dead, right, cool, you sit back. And you're out immediately, right? You're not taking your turn, right? It's been like 3 players before your turn, and you're just immediately dead. But we don't care, because the game's over within basically another at most 2 minutes. Right? And in fact, sometimes the most fun you have is when you die early on, because then you're just sipping your whiskey coke, watching your friends off, like mess around with each other. And that is fun because it's fast. Imagine Love Letter played out like across like 2 hours, right? And then like you die at the end of like the first 10 minutes. Like that's hell, right? That's genuinely terrible. So conversely, if I say, okay, this game is really fun, but you made it very slow, it takes 15 minutes, about 5 minutes, then the mechanics are clearly not really interacting with the script in any meaningful way, apparently. And that might be a problem, right? Depending on what your other non-negotiables are. Let's say instead, the non-negotiable, we don't talk about speed. This other sort of team gets the same feedback, but their non-negotiables are about challenge. So you're trying to design like, I don't know, what was it? Demon Spirits 5 or whatever. Right? And so it needs to be challenging. You need to work to beat it. Right? It's a game that you should feel satisfaction from overcoming. Right? The word overcome is the word that you use in your marketing. Okay, then if that's the feedback you get, and let's just return to question. If the feedback, so this is the feedback you get, right? It's fun, kind of slow, difficulty curve, yada yada. The questions change quite a lot, actually, which is that you're asking, well, okay, is the game not setting expectations correctly? Why are people complaining about difficulty if the game is clearly meant to be a difficult game, right? Is the specific, and so the first one is obviously to do with the difficulty, but the second one is, the person said the game feels slow. And this is sort of part of where you, as a designer, start going, okay, when they say slow, does that mean it actually is slow, or do they perceive it as being slow? What if they played the game for, let's say they played the game for 20 minutes, it's meant to be a 10-hour experience, and they say the game feels slow in the first 20 minutes of play. That's not a perceptual thing, right? That's not really a game length anymore, right? That's a perceptual issue with how they are perceiving the experience. In which case you start asking, okay, maybe a specific type of challenge is not engaging enough on the duration. My first level was 20 minutes long. I introduced a challenge in the first 5 minutes. You know how Mario does the levels are, right? So maybe I introduced my sort of like my Mario like puzzle element in the first 5 minutes, and I don't really make it any more interesting over the next 15 minutes, right? So I'm just doing the same difficulty. I'm doing the exact same thing in different colors for the next 15 minutes. It's not very fun. So it's difficult, but it's not interesting difficulty. Okay, maybe I add more variety to that. And you might even go, actually that wasn't even a half stage. They just played half the tutorial, right? Are they actually struggling with the game? Right? Maybe it's a mismatch in title. Then let's go back to the first thing. Right? Maybe I've designed Demon's Souls 6, but I've Animal Crossing aesthetics. Right? You're going to get a very weird audio mismatch. And to be clear, games do that. Call of the Lamb does it. Call of the Lamb is fantastic. Right? I don't know who anybody is called. It's phenomenal. But again, the game is called Call of the Lamb. Right? Their target audience, fingers crossed, should be going in eyes wide open. Right? You don't go into a game called Call of the Lamb expecting Animal Crossing, right? At least you should not be doing that. I'm not sure what sort of like power you're right? But so maybe you say, okay, right, maybe there's a mismatch in who I'm attracting to my games. Or you might say maybe actually there's some non-core system issues. Right? They play the easy level, but maybe I'm just throwing so much information, there's analysis paralysis, there's just so much going on that it felt very challenging. Right? So a good example is, let's say it's an Armor Core 6 fantastic game. But its customization options can be intimidating. If after the first mission, they delete your map, show you the whole shop and say, okay, right, build your map from scratch. I suspect people say, okay, this is pretty wild, right? I'm just going to need to sort of take a break from it. But whereas AC6 locks in your first mission with a pre-generated map, with a pretty balanced rollout, and they say, go play with that first. And then the park shop, the way I see Armor Core 6's park shop, they don't, I realize time, but Armor Core 6's park shop, you can refund stuff at no cost. right? So you buy a piece of, let's say you buy a gun, you can sell it back at no cost. And what's that mean? That means actually the shop is not even a shop in the actual sense. It just means that you are loaning gear at no cost from a central repository. So it just means that your pool of available parts are restrained by the total amount of money you accumulated playing the game, right? And translation, the more you play, the more tools you have available to you, the more complex goals you can make. Right? So there's a lot of stuff going on there with how their software teaching you a very complicated game, right? And so therefore, to go back to this, right, you might say that, okay, right, if we're getting that feedback, but challenge is my non-negotiable, we'll look at other stuff, right? Teaching the game, the experience, and how we sort of explain the game. So, this then is what I'm getting at, right? Non-negotiables, be very clear, right, about very salient, explicit non-negotiables. They function like houses. They let you explore and navigate space a lot safer. Because everything becomes integrated in relation to that. If you sit down and say everything is up for discussion, then Jesus Christ, we're going to be here for the next 5 hours. But if you say, okay, right, these things are fixed, we have these things on the list to discuss, and these are the feedback we got, how do we interpret that? That's probably going to take about 2 hours. Right? It genuinely saves you a lot of time and headache, which is important given that you guys are constrained by time. If you guys are constrained by budget, we change. If you guys are constrained by, let's say, I don't know, like you have no constraints on budget all the time. If you're constrained by, like, you know, like whenever Jet's happy with you guys, then that also changes, right? But given that time is your biggest constraint, I would say that this is very useful for you guys. And I think that's yeah. So going to the gym, last slide. Spend some time figuring out non-negotiables, right? Most of the professionals, I think you guys are very comfortable using this already. Right? I said you're probably making use of something like this somewhere in your design pipeline already. But I think especially if you're working in interdisciplinary teams, just spend some time discussing with each other. You're basically on the same page, right? What are our shared non-negotiables? Let's talk about that. Be clear why you set them as such, right? Because to be clear, they can change. It's just that when they change, it should be a pretty major decision you're making, right? And then just try to use them in design. Just have in the back of your head when you're sort of discussing stuff in the design. For apprentices, doubly so, right? Please be very sure what your non-negotiables are going to be, right? And yeah, I think that's it for me. Any questions?
Okay, so we have 15 minutes for questions. Feel free to ask anything. I have a question. Where can we get your game?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Wow. Okay, so Kawa is out already. That's on our website. It's out there. You know, if you guys are curious, I'll throw in the group chat later. You know, the link to our website. The other game is we kickstarted it, so it's currently in the production. So you know, back offering the sending the files over, getting it printed. So that one is available on pre-order. And then the little murder mystery RPG thing, that's an initial IO for like pay what you want. Because like that was just a fun project, so that's just for free.
Is that the killer is?
Yeah. So like that's an initial IO, so you can download it.
Can you link it?
Oh yeah, I'll link everything. Okay. Thanks, Jen. Okay. Anything? Can I say this by the way?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
I think I have.
Oh yeah.
So, like, design is iterative.
Yes.
So, because when you were saying these are the challenges and these are the questions that come up with, and then when you attack them with new solutions, there are a bunch more that comes up. When do you stop?
When Jet knocks on your door and tells you that you need to submit the day. Okay, no, sorry. More seriously, I think there is the cop-out answer. So I'll give you 2 answers. The first is the cop-out one that everybody gives, and then the second one I think is probably what I'm thinking about. So the first one is it never, like, I think somebody said that basically you can sort of view your design process as a bit asymptotic. Right? You will never hit the final point. It will get closer and closer and closer. So it's more about when are you willing to let it go. Right? There's probably some parallel analogies to be made that I'm not going to make it. But you know, like it's less about okay, it's done and complete 100%, you can serve it, and more of a it's as good as I can realistically make it, but we're absolutely insane, therefore we're going to push it out.
So for you means if I'm starting to go crazy, then that's where I stop.
So for us, we tend to talk about so that's the second answer, right? So the first answer is just the general, don't expect it to end, and therefore the second answer is one very good non-negotiable to set is a timeline for yourselves. Okay. Right. So like most of my friends will decide so let's say I design full-time, you know, with Playlock, but also do my own stuff with my friends, right? So the side stuff is all basically in a sense part-time because we're designing software like on weekends and stuff like that. So we normally start out each project by going, okay, so we're designing this thing. How long do we want to spend on this, right? What size of project? And you sort of work backwards, right? You go, if you want to make a game with tarot cards, small box, that's a relatively small thing. Because of that, we're saying maybe we will estimate about maybe a year and a half of development, and after push it out and stuff like that. And to be very clear, those are all lies because they will almost certainly be broken. But having a discussion is pretty good because it puts a lot of things on the table, right? People's time commitment, people's expectations, we are BTO, we're going to build up on that, for instance, right? So that helps you start figuring out when people are busy, when people are free, and then when inevitably you must change those deadlines. It also changes the way you're discussing it, because it's not a case of, oh no, what happens now? It's more of a, previously we said we're releasing it this month for these reasons. What has changed from then to now cause us to revisit a non-negotiable? So I guess talk about, I didn't put it in the slides, but talk about revising non-negotiables. The way my group has to do it is that we frame it as the only reason you would want to touch a non-negotiable is that there's been a change in the parameters that caused it in the first place, right? And I think framing it is very important because that means that it's very strict, right? It's not wishy-washy. And when you then decide to make that change, everybody's eyes are open going, yes, we have no choice, right? Those things have changed. Previously, we thought that you were going to be free for the next 4 months, but your boss called you back. You're only free for the next 2 months. Okay, that's changed. But again, how does it impact everything else, right? But I mean, other than that, there is no, I think, universal. I mean, if you find a universal way of determining how long it should take, let us know. But by and large, I think it's patience, right? So if you're doing a personal project, it's your own interest and patience. If you're doing something like this, it's organizers. If you're doing client work, it's client and budget and stuff like that. So oftentimes, I think timeline will be determined for you. Okay. So it should be, sorry. I know that I said answer, but one last thing. Once you have that timeline, because I think you're talking about within the iterative process, right? How do you know when you're done iterating? You work backwards from your deadline, right? And so, for instance, the way I like to, especially for games where you've got like maybe a set of core mechanics and a bunch of variable components, I like to mentally chunk it as we design the core systems first, and those need to be fun. And then we start iterating on sort of flavors of the system. The classic one, let's say magic, right? The core magic gathering system needs to work, and then you've got the 5 colors, right? And you might say that, okay, right, so in the teamwork project, we're going to spend 1 month just carrying out the core system. This 1 month just core system, no time spent on the rest, right? The next month we do that, and then obviously from there you start figuring out, okay, therefore I can only afford to iterate this many times in a month. Or conversely, iterate infinitely much, but stop by this project, that's all. Okay? So I think that's how we sort of frame it.
Thank you.
Okay, we can take one more question.
I can speak process fast enough.
Still can? Sorry, you have a question?
Yeah. So, how do I do this? I think every game designer has this stuff. What is your most proud moment where you managed to tackle a bunch of non-negotiables at once?
When you say tackle non-negotiables, you mean what, fulfill them or to hit them or how?
Let's say you want this, but then they conflict with each other. What is a moment where you feel like you are a genius and you finally figured out how to balance them out?
I would say actually, so I think the question frames non-negotiables slightly antagonistically. In that where you're trying to deal with them, right? These are things that you have to deal with in order to produce. I try to actually interpret, so again, it's a very ugly word for a reason. But in terms of how I frame them myself, I see them more as sort of inspiration. So for instance, if like my best example, I think it's the game that I'm on course now, but I think the clearest example of this as a inspiration is that if you want to do a game where saying that I don't be a friend anymore as a mechanic, right? That's not really I don't see it as a limitation or a thing to hit, right? Like that's clearly an inspiration for the game, right? And that's going to flavor the sort of things I'm trying to put in the game. And that's in a sense helpful. So if you're asking me if right now, like, is that moment where I'm like, oh no, these three are conflicting and I managed to solve all that once, I can't think of anything from that because I don't mentally use them that way. Oftentimes, in fact, you're looking at one non-negotiable and that's helping you springboard to solve other things, right? So I think an example of that, for instance, is so looking at like this game, right, where actually let's use this one, right? So with this one, right? So we said, okay, I said I don't want predetermined ending or solution and there's no GM, right? So that's very messy, right? So how do you have a murder mystery, come to a conclusion, but not have? Because especially for murder mysteries, you normally have somebody there who knows what's going on, right? And tell you, right? So actually, like Mr. Smith did it, right? And how do you shape that going, to happen? As I said, okay, if there's no determined ending and we don't have a GM, so basically everybody's taking on the same role. So the game must emerge from everybody contributing essentially the same amount of material to the game, right? So and then if the third one there is that, okay, we talk about ace attorney. what is the central unit of, what is the most, if you distill acetylene into its quintessential, what is the central unit of that? It is the items. Acetylene is ultimately an architectural game. It's a game about items, unpacking items, studying items, sort of turning items over, opening them up, right? Going, you break the pop inside as a key, right? Who put the key there, right? That sort of stuff. It's that sort of game, right? And it does it in a very comedic tone. There's a lot of story going on, but fundamentally it's about looking at clues. And so, okay, right, those three things there. I've got clues that involve themselves changing and sort of mutating as the game progresses. There's no GM, and there's no predetermined solution. So from there, basically the way the game plays is that players contribute clues, right? We twist the clues, and it's from the implications between the clues and the story emerges, right? And so that's how sort of getting around it, because therefore I don't need to start with the story. The story is told through implication. Implications emerge from the items, and the items allow for the twist to happen. And because everybody's bringing items to the table, in a sense, there's no need for a GM, right? Because again, we all just bring an item, or we all add an item, and from there we're going to get a very nice flow, a very nice sort of rhythm to the game, without the need for having somebody there to sort of run in and say, okay, you speak, or like, okay, I'm going to set up a team with you, right? So that's how this game is trying to do that sort of stuff, right? But again, I guess the one thing is this: really don't try to see your non-negotiables as restrictions, because like if you find yourself opposing them, like then it becomes quite annoying. Just see them as this is see them as friends how to do. Because genuinely the scariest design and the most annoying times is when you sit down with a client or sit down with somebody and they go like, well, just make it fun. Right? And you sort of shrug and you're like, Jesus Christ. Because what's that even mean, right? Like what sort of fun, what sort of player, what sort of target audience? Without those things there to help you, it's genuinely terrifying. And so I like my non-negotiables quite a lot. Like they are my trusted friends, because with them there, everything is going to be easy for me to make. Okay. That's it from me, I think.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Thanks.
Phone is going to tango. Okay.